Wednesday, October 18th is recording on. I do see it is on. This is the C4 Metro Subcommittee. I have my esteemed co-chair, Commissioner Savas, on board, and so far it's just a nice, small, precise group of us ready to hit the road running today. So with that, we're going to jump right into our JPAC discussion, RTP process and update. And as always, we are pleased to have Kim Ellis with us from Metro. Kim, the floor is yours. Unless anyone else wants to chime in. Otherwise, rocking and rolling.
All right. Well, thank you, Councilor Sherman. So I'm happy to be here today. I'm going to just give a very brief overview of the presentation that we'll be giving JPAC tomorrow. I do have some additional slides that I can bring up if desired, just around some of the tolling conversation, because I know that has been a big topic of discussion as we move forward. So I will share my screen here. Can you see that okay?
Looking good.
Actually, I'm going to go back to the start of this slide deck. Great. So thank you. So today, I'm here just to give an update, but really this is we're in the final steps of the regional transportation plan update that's been underway for the last 2 years. We are working through the technical and policy advisory committees to have the plan adopted before the current plan expires. It expires on December 6th. Actually, after this meeting, the Metro Technical Advisory Committee, which is the advisory committee to the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, MPAC, will be making their recommendation this morning, and we will continue to have discussions tomorrow at JPAC. And then MPAC next week will be asking them to make their recommendation to the Metro Council. And then November is when we will be seeking JPAC's recommendation to the Metro Council. This update has been informed by a little over 2 years of public engagement and local jurisdiction engagement through coordinating committees such as this, many MPAC, JPAC meetings, TPAC and MTAC workshops. We had 6 workshops with JPAC and the Metro Council around some of the key policy areas. And then significant stakeholder engagement and community engagement with community-based organizations, online surveys, community leaders forums, and as well as business forums. And so there has been a lot of feedback and input that really shaped the public review draft plan that was released last July, and that we are continuing to develop recommendations to address the feedback we received during that comment period. There's a public comment report with all of the feedback that we received from all of those different sources, online survey, online comment form, as well as testimony, letters, emails on the draft plan that was released. The Metro staff recommendations that are being brought forward to the committee are responding to the specific changes that have been proposed as part of the public comment period. And really the recommendations are responding directly to the feedback that we received during that comment period, but are also responding in ways that are addressing comments and feedback that we've been receiving throughout the process. The Metro staff recommendations that are being brought forward to the committees are organized in 2 parts. The first part, which is what I'm going to focus on today, are 5 key policy topic areas. And for these topics, we are working to have recommendations come to JPAC and MPAC for their discussion individually. And there are proposed changes in response to each of these. These really are the big issues that we had identified as needing further discussion as the plan is finalized. The second part of the Metro staff recommendations are what we call, or consider consent items, and these will be, committees will be asked to act on them as a bundle. There's over 600 different individual recommendations in this consent item. Many are just more minor corrections, adjustments, filling in gaps in information, but there are some substantive changes as well. But these are being recommended for consideration as a bundle. So these are the 5 topic areas, and so these were highlighted in the JPAC worksheet that I provided Trent for your packet today. And as I said, I'm just going to walk through what are the recommendations that are being discussed and will continue to be discussed as the plan is finalized. We do expect to have some proposed amendments to the Metro staff recommendation as this goes forward, but our recommendations are the starting point. So in terms of the investment emphasis recommendations, they really are aimed at continuing to work to better align the project list with the RTP goals and policies. So some of the recommendations that we've made are project list adjustments. In particular, at the last JPAC meeting last month, there was some discussion around unbundling of the ODOT safety projects. And so that is something that is that we've worked with ODOT to develop, and there's recommendations about how to go about doing that. And this really will allow us to have a more specific accounting of where some of the safety investments that have been made or will be made by ODOT to our system as part of future investments that have been adopted by the Oregon Transportation Commission and by JPAC and the Council in the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, and that we can account for that in our analysis of the plan performance. We also are recommending more regular reporting on investments in safety in the region across all of the agencies, particularly those that are funded using federal transportation dollars. And then we have a number of recommendations that are really looking to the next regional transportation plan update. We are required to do this every 5 years. So the next RTP update will be due by this time in 2028. And so some of those recommendations are including having JPAC provide more oversight with community and business leaders on the call for projects and the evaluation process and how the project lists are developed, doing some additional work in advance of that on our metrics and evaluation tools, also working to develop additional policy guidance for the next call for projects, and then having build in a longer review and refinement period time than we were able to do within this RTP update because of our federal deadline. The second topic area is around implementation of the pricing policy in the RTP. And the recommendations that we have put in the material are really focused on ensuring the regional concerns and local concerns are addressed in the NEPA processes that ODOT is currently involved in, and as the projects go forward toward implementation. As you may recall, right before we began this RTP update, there was an amendment to the Regional Transportation Plan, the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan, to bring in the PE, the preliminary engineering phase of the I-205 toll project. As part of that action, when JPAC and the Metro Council approved that amendment, there were a series of ODOT commitments that were adopted as an exhibit to that ordinance. And so our recommendations are really working to ensure that those commitments that were adopted by JPAC and the council are addressed as those projects go forward and as they come forward for future amendments to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. JPAC and the council we're recommending build an accounting in there. So findings that demonstrate how those projects are meeting the policy, but also following through on the commitments. The policy in the RTP really was developed with an eye towards addressing all of the concerns that had been raised during that amendment to the I-205 toll project, but also throughout the RTP update as the policy was developed. And I do have slides that if folks are interested in seeing more about that, I can bring up later. And the third area of discussion is around regional transportation funding. There is a recognition that we have many transportation needs all across the region. Developing areas of the region need infrastructure. Existing areas need infrastructure. We're growing, and so this series of recommendations is really about how can we work together to, as a region, to bring more funding? And part of that is really recommending that JPACT have a very active role, particularly leading up to the 2025 legislative session, where there's expectation that there will be continued state level funding discussions. It's also important that the region be prepared to participate in that legislative session, but also those state level funding conversations that are already happening. As we know, the gas tax is not keeping pace, and there's a lot of limitations with the kinds of investments that can be made. That as a region, we need to continue to work to increase our competitiveness for federal funding opportunities. There's many new streams of funding that are available, and so it's important that we're working to put ourselves in a good position to be ready to apply and successfully compete for that federal funding. Also, recommending research on new revenues, that's also happening at the state level, and this could build on the equitable funding research that we did conduct earlier in the RTP process. And then the last bullet there is really highlighting the important need specifically to secure long-term funding for transit in our region. And that's for all service, both community level, but also regional level service, that we have a lot of transit needs and desires as a region, and support community plans and visions, as well as our regional 2040 growth concept. And so that is something that we just need to work even harder to get to. The fourth area is around our climate tools and analysis, and the recommendations really are continuing to work, are focused on continuing to work to improve our tools to better inform future policy and investment decisions. We are working to update the climate analysis. Concerns were raised as part of the public comment period that some of the fleet mix and age assumptions that we were using, which we were required to use under the state requirements for our analysis, but we are going to update it to show the effect of emissions using the current fleet mix and age. Other recommendations are focused on continuing to improve our evaluation and modeling tools. We are also recommending that we request the state to do a review of their statewide transportation strategy assumptions. That has not been done since 2018, and they are doing work, have a new website that's available. But it's important, I think, for us to feel that our efforts to reduce our emissions and VMT per capita as required by the state, that the underlying assumptions that those those targets are based on, that we feel good about those, and so that is a key part of that recommendation. We've also made a recommendation to really identify actions locally and regionally that we can take as a region and at the local level to support the electrification, electric vehicle transition as well. There's a lot of work and resources being deployed at the federal and state level, but very clearly, as part of the public comment period, we heard desires for us to do more locally and regionally, and to really have Metro be a convener of that to help support that transition, which is critical. And then the last area is around the new updated mobility policy and its implementation. The recommendations really focus on completing out the remaining work to have the policy be able to be implemented regionally and locally. And that the recommendations really highlight the importance of continuing to shift from the sole focus of congestion that the current policy focuses on to a broader multimodal approach. And there's a number of very detailed individual actions that really outline the work that we will continue to do with local governments, as well as our state partners in coordination with the Oregon Highway Plan update and statewide implementation of the transportation planning rule. And some examples of that are highlighted there, but it's really just focusing on the commitment that this is a priority, that there is work to be done, and local implementation of the policy would not occur until after this work is completed and reflected in an updated regional transportation functional plan in 2025. So these are the final dates of the final actions for each of the committees. So as I said, MTAC will be making their recommendation later this morning to MPAC. Next week, MPAC will be asked to make their recommendation to the Metro Council. And then we will bring MPAC's recommendation to TPAC. We do try and align the recommendations while they have different roles and responsibilities, each of these committees. By the time it comes to JPAC and the Metro Council, we really work to try and have it all come together. But where there are differences in recommendations, we will also highlight those as that goes forward. So that is what I had to present, and I'm happy to answer questions. And if there's if folks want to have more information around some of the tolling policy and recommendations, I'm happy to also speak to that.
Very good. Thank you for the update. Councillor Berry, you're up.
Thank you for your presentation. You touched base briefly on there was new streams of federal funding. I was hoping that you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So there's a federal transportation bill that was approved 2 years ago, and there's a lot of funding that is tied towards transit, towards climate reduction, towards resilience, improving the resilience of the transportation system for earthquake, other disasters. So there's just different streams of funding from different parts of the federal government that in order to be eligible to apply for those federal transportation dollars, projects need to be on the financially constrained project list in the regional transportation plan.
Very good. Thank you for the response. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thank you, Kim, for your presentation. Some of you have heard part of this before, but I think it's worth, especially at this juncture, to repeat it and put some emphasis on certain aspects. So my concern is still, and I think it's one thing to say it, it's one thing to somewhat live it from my world, my perspective. It's another one sometimes to be there on site. And I've been doing tours and with folks, regional leaders in whether it's a Sunrise Corridor, it's the 205 corridor. So I'm constantly reminded in a real way, kind of reinforces my concerns when I'm standing in some of these highly impacted areas and watching the diversion and sitting on the corner or standing on the corner, talking to people or driving people through the corridor and not seeing any transit. Last week I was on the corner of 10th and Willamette, and the traffic circle is kind of open. I was there for an hour and a half. I did not see, and nor did the people that joined me see one bus the entire hour and a half. So I'm just kind of concerned with the reliance on the RTP on transit when the paradigm is such that it seems to be project oriented. And the projects seem to be steered towards, policies in which the criteria does not fit Clackamas County. And I won't go into detail. Some of you know what that is. So the paradigm currently is that the areas that have transit get more, and the areas that have no transit, and really no path to getting more transit. But yet the model and the climate goals and all those things seem to be in conflict with some of the other goals. For example, whether it's equity, for example, I'm not against equity. I'm not at all. But with the criteria being, with an emphasis on criteria being on equity and low income, and our neighbors to the north, north of Clackamas having a greater concentrations of that, the paradigm isn't going to change, apparently. So my comment is this: the tools that are being, or my question is this to you, Kim, the tools that are being used to evaluate this, I'd love to hear your assessment. Are they really designed for impacts, or to steer? I mean, I'm just kind of understanding the model that TriMet uses, or not TriMet, but Metro uses. Is it really designed for tolling and behaviors, or is it more designed for traffic flows on a technical basis?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Savas. Our model is the state of the art in the U.S., and it is intended to do that. It does very well at looking at both changes in travel pattern in response to land use, to pricing changes, the availability of different modes. It accounts for all of that. And it also is able to help us understand the impacts of different investment decisions. So it is a state-of-the-art tool. It's something that we are required to maintain as the MPO for the region, and under federal guidance. This tool and the data that underlies it is very sound. But it's a tool to help inform policymakers in making decisions. It's not going to tell us an answer. It's going to give information to help understand the trade-offs and choices about different investments and their effects, and programs such as pricing. And so, so I think our evaluation work that we've done in the RTP uses the model. It uses engagement and community feedback, and it also used a project list assessment that was trying to evaluate at a very high level how projects advance the different RTP goals. And Clackamas County has a lot of great projects that support the RTP goals, support your community plans. They are not at odds. It's working towards building a complete system.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll just one other comment. I'm sure there's other people I want to speak to. So with climate in mind, and I looked through all the slides, I heard what you said. And again, I really appreciate you, Kim. So this is not, this is just more of an observation from my standpoint. I don't see anything in there about anything that would lead me to believe that the paradigm has changed, or there's any progress towards getting regional balance when it comes to multimodal investments. And I think that is my underlying concern. I think that the negative impacts to climate are going to continue, and we're not going to meet our federally required RTP or state required RTP goals on climate. And I don't know, I'm not challenging the tool. I'd love to better understand the tool, but if the tool does not align with the policies, and the policies don't align with the funding, then it's not going to change. And again, hence the paradigm. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Good comments. I mean, I will echo that sentiment. In this area, you can stand on Sunnyside Road and see no bus, no bicyclists, no walkers. It is single occupancy vehicles that are being utilized. I wouldn't even call it the majority. It's the vast majority of people getting from point A to point B. And so I think a lot of the concern that I always have is on kind of the utilization of the tools, and how either dynamic and flexible they can be, and looking at applying them in different regions, because the regions do have very different specific needs. And also, I think, in my business, in the investment industry, we have a lot of statistical modeling tools we use, but those tools are really, they are a foundation for the decision making. They're not the decision makers. And so you have to provide oversight and objectivity and thoughtfulness on top of the tool as you kind of deploy these resources. And so I think that's definitely going to be a challenge as we move forward. It will be, utilizing these in a dynamic way, and then also providing those resources for the newly urbanized areas, the underserved areas that are outside of the urbanized metro region. They have a very different need and a different financial base required to get these done. So I'll stop there. Ms. Burek, you've got your hand up, please.
So actually, I'm willing to go after Councilor Pratt. I do want to share some of the work that staff has been doing at the TPAC and MTAC level in preparation for the upcoming meetings. So why doesn't Councilor Pratt go first, and then I can share? Sure, let's do that. Councilor Pratt.
I guess my question, you mentioned the gas tax, and we all know that's going to be a reduced, it's a continuing reduced source of revenue. So on your slide, when you talk about funding for the region and looking at potential new revenues and working with the state, is that going to include looking at the effects of the reduction of gas tax on the counties and cities and where we could get additional revenue sources, or just at the state level?
So I think that's part of what the JPAC work program that gets developed, what the scope of that will be. So we've outlined that there are a variety of needs, including, just basic maintenance of the system that local governments are challenged to be able to meet and address, in addition to expanding to meet, a growing region's needs. So certainly it'll be happening at the state level, and it seems that it would happen also in other, within the regional conversation as well. And looking at other ways to fund the system, other parts of the region do have system development charges, transportation fees that are tied to development. So, I think that's also one of the unique things about this region, and challenges, frankly, that other parts of the region have been more successful in raising local revenue to help complement or leverage the federal and state dollars that are coming. And that should also be part of the discussion that everybody has a role in funding the transportation system needs, including the users of the transportation system.
Very good. Thank you for the response. I guess maybe one related question, so that, there's still a lot of talk in Salem about reducing or eliminating certain SDCs to make housing affordability more efficient going forward. Is that getting any traction? Have we kind of factored that in? We had a presentation last night at City Council on, SDC methodology and kind of where we fall in relation to the region. And that is a concern, that there is getting to be more and more pressure to reduce and or eliminate SDCs for a significant proportion of new growth. So, I mean, are you getting any wind of that at this point, or is that still just conjecture out there?
Yeah, I have not, but I think that's interesting. I mean, I think that poses challenges, further challenges, as you noted.
Very good. Okay, Ms. Burek.
Great. Well, it's good.
I'm sorry, Trent. Did you? I apologize. I saw Trent get a little hand movement in there.
I just didn't want to get away from that question about SDCs. There is momentum, and several folks and a couple of legislators who are looking into SDCs. And so that's been something that's happening at the state legislature a couple of times. There was a work group last year that was aiming at trying to figure that out. At the county, we probably have some of the same concerns that you have. We have multiple departments or programs that use SDCs to build new things. And if you take those SDCs away, it might be a little cheaper for the developer, but the price of that house is still going to be driven by the market, not by how much it costs to build that. So it's kind of a wash for Joe and Jane user or purchaser of the house. In addition to it, if the developer's not spending the money on the SDCs, it gets pushed over to the buyer. So not only is the market cost the same or higher, now it's higher because they're trying to cover the rate of the SDCs that weren't purchased by the developer, the people who have that front money So it puts everybody in a weird, awkward spot. I've heard people talk about loans, sort of loan programs for the development in general. But again, that kind of pushes some of it back to the users. And so it seems like it's not a perfect system still, and a lot of it's still in the conception phase. But you're correct, there are conversations happening at the state. That's just what I've heard from a couple of folks.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, Karen.
Great.
Now I'm not going to interrupt you.
No, that's quite all right. Well, I wanted to say a few words because we really are at the end of a 2-year process. And the regional transportation plan and the 2023 regional transportation plan is a compilation of quite a bit of work. I don't know, it's probably like 700 pages long. I mean, it's a really big document, and we're really down to the last, I would say, 4 pretty important meetings between the staff representatives and our representatives at MPAC and JPAC. So just to kind of give you an update at the staff level on how we've been trying to engage. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that it was due, these policy items that we were talking about now that have kind of risen to the top do reflect a lot of those concerns and those top level concerns that C4 wrote in their letter. I mean, it's part of the reason why we get to talk about them now instead of perhaps all the other, 600 pages of information. And so it really allows us to focus those conversations. But even within those 5 issues, there are things that at least at the staff level feel that there bears a need for further conversation. And sometimes it relates to really detailed elements about kind of the words that are used. So just to give you a high level idea of the issues that staff has been bringing up within the staff level MTAC and TPAC around the first policy topic, which is investment areas, is that first and foremost, it's important to recognize that the priorities that are within the RTP are really built off of local priorities within the transportation system plan that each individual jurisdiction does. There's a framework that we're given as we move projects forward, but we really do need to recognize that the projects are prioritized locally. And that shouldn't be lost in any sort of kind of additional work within the RTP. Because it all is sort of a circular process where each individual jurisdiction works and is required to reflect RTP policies within their local TSPs. And then we work to prioritize the projects, and then we move them up to the RTP. And then, so we're all working to do that. But being able to respect and recognize the importance of that local work. So we recommend some minor language changes, a part of that's kind of moving through the process, and each of the committees will see. I think from the, we as staff have submitted some small language changes around the pricing policies, but that likely will be a conversation that comes up in the first. Folks will see it at MPAC and then at JPAC, but there will be conversation around that. With respect to the regional transportation funding, we are supportive of all the proposals and the proposed language moving forward by Metro. So we didn't have many detailed comments or recommended changes there. We really are working towards for the climate tools, acknowledging what has been talked around about this table and making sure there's support for that electric vehicle infrastructure. And I think, as Kim noted, we're working towards that within the conversations. And then finally, around the mobility policy implementation, this is an element that, again, has been worked on very hard over the last couple of years. And we anticipate that additional work needs to be done as a part of the functional plan process. So some of the language that we're looking at really kind of gets into the weeds of how it's described within the RTP, but the intent is still there. So with all of that, I think as Kim has said, you know, the first meeting actually happens at 9 o'clock with MTAC, and that they'll be working to talk about these different issues and then develop that recommendation that ends up going to MPAC and so on. So I'm also here if folks have questions about sort of what we've been doing at the local level to help support the recommendations that are going forward.
Very good. Thank you very much. We'll wrap up with Commissioner Savas before we jump into high capacity transit. So Commissioner Savas, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I have a question, whether it's Karen or it is Kim that can answer it, and that is that if tolling or congestion pricing is not a viable use, whether it's by voter action or it's by legislative action or local actions, if that's not a viable use, does that undermine the RTP or invalidate our requirements of the RTP?
No, Commissioner Savas, you know, the RTP, you know, as I said, we update it every 5 years to reflect changes that have happened or are happening at that time. So if, as those projects, you know, for example, the I-205 project goes forward and through that NEPA process, a determination is made to not include tolling, then we would, in the next RTP update, you know, reflect that as part of that RTP update. If there's changes at the state level, you know, through the legislature or other around this too, you know, we would account for that. And at the timing of the change relative to the next RTP update would also affect when we would address it, like whether we would need to do something before the next RTP update. That would be a discussion that we would have with JPAC and the Metro Council. Yeah, and I just to be really very clear, the RTP does not require tolling in those corridors. It does have, we have had a long-standing policy since the 2000 RTP that when new capacity is being added to the system, to the throughway system, that tolling is one of the, that we look at alternatives to that with tolling in combination with pricing, with transit, with increased street connectivity, other system management and operations and investments. That has been a long-standing policy, but it does not dictate that it must be implemented.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And I'm assuming when I say tolling that we're looking at, I mean, tolling is synonymous with congestion pricing.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Okay, in the interest of time, let's transition to high capacity transit recommendations. Allie Holmquist, welcome. Always good to see you. Present away.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me back today. Similar to Kim, I'm going to give a preview of the presentation that I'll be making at the next JPAC meeting on the high capacity transit strategy as we look towards beginning the adoption process that you've been already talking about this morning. And I'm going to focus mainly on, rather than an overview, because you've seen me so many times before, really the changes since we last spoke back in May. So back in May, we reached the final milestone for the update process, which was the initial draft report that we spoke about. And that was following feedback from the Parking Partner Working Group, Metro, Partner Advisory Committees, and other public groups. And at those meetings, which included the County Coordinating Committee meetings as well, staff heard that there was great support for, but also need for flexibility in providing roadway priority, concerns about community stability, a need for including more information on the business case for high capacity investment. We heard an importance for a coordinated transit-oriented development strategy. We heard a lot of eagerness to support the tier 3 and 4 corridors with near-term better bus improvements, and clear interest in future guidance and coordination in using the strategy to advance the corridors based on the recommendations provided in the report, which was really exciting. And we also heard a little bit too of excitement about looking at more nimble approaches in rapid bus implementation through the implementation plan work that you saw in Chapter 8 of the 2023 RTP, and then additional needs to consider for shuttles and then areas lacking transit service, a little bit of what you've been talking about earlier today, particularly in new growth areas as well. And so in response to that feedback, we actually made changes to that initial draft report in May to create the draft that went out for public review later that summer. So a couple highlights of the types of changes. There were some things just to update the additional engagement events that we had done since that time and provide more information about those. Some technical edits based on further work with the working group and things that we caught just to standardize some of the terms, the format, and then further qualify data and make sure that our references were all in there. And then also additional detail to add to the project process and actions, since those were really the new things, those recommendations and actions in the report that we were talking about in May. We also heard definitely an interest in supporting community stability and a little bit of concern about displacement. So we added some additional language on the opportunities with rapid bus around community stability, and then also making sure that we strengthen the language about proactive investment and work in community stability as well. There was a new call-out box that we added that talked about the business case for high capacity investment based on what we heard in some of the outreach with business groups to really draw that nexus. And then we also had been mentioning that corridor level planning context appendix that we were working on to make sure that all of the information from T2020, from the work that we were doing with the working group and what we heard from partners throughout this process about specific corridors and corridor needs were reflected in the strategy, and that there was a place to house all of that information. And we're also actually, one other thing is we are looking at developing some additional scope work, because we do have some remaining funds for the update that will expand on this and start to work on some case studies to support the rapid bus implementation plan that we'll be picking up probably next year, and then also looking at opportunities to create an additional tool for jurisdictions to use based on the excitement that we heard for starting to use the project pathway to advance corridors. So getting to the summer, on July 10th, we released the draft high capacity transit strategy for public review that included the changes I just described for a 45-day public comment period, which included a public hearing on July 27th, and that went through August 25th. And you heard about this process in detail from Kim throughout this summer, and that included broad community engagement with it as well. In total, we received 56 comments on the public review draft related to the high capacity transit strategy through letters, emails, and the online comment form. And the comments that we received overall expressed clear support for the high capacity transit vision and the pipeline, especially in connecting regional and town centers and making transit faster and more convenient, as well as keen interest in identifying resources to implement the vision, which Kim also spoke to today. And then we also had comments that expressed support for particular corridors and projects. Far and away, that was the tier 1 and 2 corridors. And there were other comments that asked clarifying questions about the vision, connections to other regional work, and some of the future work that's coming, and did pose some considerations about service challenges, opportunities, and trade-offs as well. And so in response to that feedback, staff has proposed the following changes to that public review draft from the summer by consent to create the adopted strategy. So these were all more technical edits, in some cases editorial. A lot were clarifying or adding information rather than some of the policy level types of edits that Kim spoke to today. So these all were brought forward as consent and were discussed in more detail by TPAC and MTAC this month. Just to highlight what some of those were, Again, there were more technical edits to standardize terms, especially with the Federal Transit Administration, just making sure that those are really consistent, and then also providing more clarity. And you can see I've just noted the sort of comment numbers here if you wanted to go back and look in Exhibit B at what comments I'm referring to. We added some language about the additional transit tools in the toolbox, something that we spoke about in May, how high capacity investment is just one tool in the broader toolbox for completing our transit network vision. And then we added some language based on several comments that we got around accessibility and looking for opportunities for improving that, especially as TriMet is looking to do an update of the coordinated plan for people with disabilities next year. There were, again, more details added, new sections on that rapid bus implementation plan that's described in Chapter 8, but making sure that was also clearly articulated in the high capacity transit strategy as well. And then again, some new survey engagement summaries with additional detail just to document some of the feedback that we got in Appendix A. And then in the Appendix F, which was the corridor level appendix, just a little bit of work to make sure that the titles were standardized, included their number indicators. And then we had some feedback from the working group to add some detail on where existing and planned bus priority lanes are today or are planned to go in the future. So then the discussion today, and then also that we are preparing for JPACT, is in preparation for the adoption process that Kim just talked about, which is progressed this month following that first hearing at Council on September 28th. And then the things that you'll see in the packet are the resolution language, Resolution 23-5348, for the purpose of adopting the 2023 High Capacity Transit Strategy, which is Attachment 1. Then there is in Exhibit A, Attachment 2, the 2023 HCT strategy document that was provided for public review this summer. And then in Exhibit B, which is also Attachment 3, there's a summary of the comments received during public review, and then also the staff recommended consent changes and or responses based on those comments to incorporate into the final document that is considered for adoption. And that's really what I summarized in the presentation just a couple slides ago. And then finally in Attachment 4, there is the staff report to the resolution that will go to Council following JPACT and MPACT's recommendations in consideration with the public hearing for adoption. And then Kim already went over these dates as well, but the high capacity transit strategy will be following the same process. So at MTAC, and as Karen mentioned later today, at MPAC on October 25th, where TPAC will be considering a recommendation to JPACT on the strategy on November 3rd, with JPAC considering their own recommendation on the 16th. And then finally, that second public hearing in consideration of adoption by Metro Council on November 30th. Just to summarize, in October, since we did start the discussions with TPAC and MTAC, there weren't any further comments from MTAC on the HCT strategy. There were 2 comments from TPAC members that were made on the strategy in those last meetings. The first was that the City of Portland had requested some additional technical edits based on the work of the working group to be incorporated into the consent items. There already was in the working group comment a line about adding additional edits as needed. And these were different things like making sure the green line was listed in a list of corridors that were planned or in planning before the 2009 HCT plan was adopted, some recommendations about breaking up paragraphs. So very much in the realm of editorial and technical comments. And then the only other comment was the City of Tualatin and Washington County City's representative was asking about alternatives to the staff response regarding tiering for the Highway 99 and West corridors. There hasn't been any language brought forward as an amendment for consideration by MTAC today or TPAC on November 3rd yet, but that was something that was asked at the meetings in October. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that following adoption of that high capacity transit strategy, the work won't stop there. We'll be shifting to a focus on implementation. So in Chapter 8 of the Regional Transportation Plan, you will see a lot of that work outlined on Tier 1 corridor project development that's underway, some additional work on the Steel Bridge capacity tunnel study, and then that rapid bus implementation plan that I've been speaking about. And then also there'll be additional related activities done through the regional transit, Better Bus, and transit-oriented development regional programs, as well as continued work on the Cascadia high-speed rail project, ultimately to connect into the system and maybe some inter-regional connections as well. And then finally, most importantly, the connecting first and last mile work that will start early next year, that will use the work that has been done on the high capacity transit study to start looking at expanding the network through those through first and last mile connections, considering how microtransit could be a solution there, as well as, again, for those new growth areas, in particular in areas lacking service. So with that, thank you very much for having me back, and I want to stop there for questions and comments.
Very good. Thank you very much for the information. I do think that, just from a general perspective, I know that there's been concern, at least in my jurisdiction, about, how will Metro be creating, or is there a plan in place for both my Metro and TriMet on how to grow ridership in like the UGB expansion areas? And, and as it ties into like my city, what type of objective guidance could be given to move a corridor up in the priority tier and make them more attractive? Right now, it seems that it's we can't figure out kind of how things fall where they fall. So any thoughts on that? I think that's really the only question I've got today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. There is actually some work already being planned. I just spoke with TriMet yesterday. The Forward Together 2.0 process is ramping up, and that's going to be really exciting. There's going to be some work that we're going to be embarking on in partnership, and then they're going to be doing a lot of work. They're reaching out to all of the jurisdictions right now to be talking about that, and they're really going to be building from the policy framework in the Regional Transportation Plan to look at, what will it take to get to the some of the targets that we've set, to implement the goals related to that transit network vision. And that will help shape how they have some additional dollars that can be reinvested. So that's really exciting. That is something that we are coordinating closely on to make sure that we can coordinate as we're looking at the access to transit plan, because as they're looking at some of those areas where service could be bumped up and or new routing, new service, we want to be able to reflect that latest information into the connecting first and last mile study. So we'll be staying close there. And in the transit vision now, there's already a little bit of a framework from TriMet service enhancement plans where they had identified areas for community connector shuttles. But there's been a lot of work by jurisdictions since then. Clackamas County has a transit development plan. Washington County has done a lot of work on first and last mile and also has transit plans as well. So really needing to reflect more recent work that's been done. But that is something that TriMet has as a starting place. So I think as far as the work that we're going to be doing together, there is a lot that's coming in the future that's going to be really exciting. And we are working now to make sure that is all coordinated and fitting together. And then the second question around the moving the corridors forward. So the project pathway really helps provide guidance for that, because we have the readiness and assessment criteria that was actually adopted back in 2018 that really helps with the cycle part of the process, which is for particular corridors, there's opportunity, we did a high level look more at the region, but when we have the opportunity to look at a corridor level, we can get a little bit more of a drill down and be looking in more detail at applying the criteria and then providing more specific guidance around, here is, and we have a little bit of this at the high level for each corridor, but where each corridor is a little bit different in kind of which criteria it was rising up, and then maybe which criteria where it was less so. And so that is something that we'll be able to provide assistance with, to be able to show the kind of places to focus on for each corridor and provide more information as we apply the criteria specifically. And we can also be working with staff at least to show the high level information we have now, because it is going to be different for each corridor. Some corridors have done a lot more planning work, but maybe some of the development hasn't come to fruition yet. Or there might be, you know, some of the policy work that needs, there might be, the development might be there and the densities to support transit, but maybe some of the policy work isn't there. So it will look a little bit different. And we are looking at right now as some of that additional work that we've identified with the additional funds at a checklist that can be used. So getting a little bit more into detail in the recommendations, as you're looking at the comp plan and TSP, you could be looking for specific line items to be checking off the list that will help provide more specificity to jurisdictions that are looking to advance corridors. Because we really heard a lot of interest in starting to do that work together. And so we are trying to find the ways that we can support it. And I also would be interested in hearing if there are other ways. We had talked with the working group about a couple options to see which would be most they'd be most interested, or what would be most helpful. But as we continue work, what other things that we could provide that would be helpful in making sure that we can advance those together.
I mean, I think that kind of begs the question. So, is the prioritization process tied to the periodic review process, or is there a method of like a jurisdiction applying to have one reviewed and in real time?
That's a great question. So I think for the analysis, as we go through the pathway, that's something that we can do as part of just some of the corridor planning work that we are advancing together, sort of in between RTP updates. Normally, the time when we take a closer look at the entire tiering would be on that 5-year cycle. And then usually when, like this, in this case, we looked at a broader update. So that was for 2023. If we want to do a whole host relook, it would be, maybe on a less frequent cycle than that. But every time we do update the RTP, we are looking at new information and making sure that we're refreshing our assumptions. So really 5 years next RTP is when we'd be considering that new data. We've been talking about tolling as well. There is the ODOT public transportation strategy work that's going on at the same time. There's a little bit of a phase 2 that we're expecting with that. And so that's something in addition to work that's been done since this last RTP that we'd also be looking at how we need to reflect. So I expect that there'll be additional things that we'll be considering in 2028 as part of the next update.
Okay, very good. Ms. Beard.
Hi, so I did want to note, during the presentation, there wasn't didn't show the actual priority map. And so can I just show that for folks? Because I want to make sure that folks can see what's in the plan, and I'll do it for a second. And while you're able to look at this, I just wanted to highlight, so Clackamas County did participate as a part of the work group. During that time, we brought up some concerns about how things were being developed, specifically in relationship to the fact that the 2009 plan had about 16 corridors, and now we're looking at about 29. So we doubled the number of corridors within the plan. Also, as you can see, so the yellow and the solid lines. So the yellow are the tier 1 and tier 2 corridors. The solid lines are the existing high capacity transit. So those that are dashed in blue and purple are the 3 and 4. So what can be clearly seen by this map is that that really within the vision for the high capacity transit vision, it's really hard to see how it extends down into the regional center at Oregon City or Happy Valley for quite some time. And we raised some concerns about that. There were issues related to how things were prioritized and sort of near term being able to access federal funds that really did weight some of the corridors. We also brought up some concerns about the fact that there were corridors that were parallel to existing corridors that rose up higher than trying to extend out to our other regional centers. We understood that those things couldn't be addressed at that time, but I just did want to highlight that staff still has concerns about those things within the vision. We have concerns about the impact of high capacity transit on the overall cost of providing transit. Here in Clackamas County, growing our transit service and growing our transit coverage is very important. And we wouldn't want to be disadvantaged by more costs going to high capacity transit in other areas that then we wouldn't have as much funds available for transit. But I do know and recognize that there are many, many different conversations around transit, and this is only one of them. And Ally did recognize that there'll be a plan to talk about shuttles. There'll be additional work on transit service enhancement plans. There'll be additional work on Better Bus. But I guess I just wanted to note from a staff level is that we do have concerns about the fact that the vision doesn't show a pathway forward for some areas within our region to be able to achieve sort of faster, more reliable service.
Very good comments. Let's see, Councilor Berry, you're next up.
Thank you. So Ally, thank you for your report. I really appreciate that. And Karen, thank you for bringing up the map, because that highlights the comments I would like to bring up. That the city of Wilsonville and SMART recommended that the HCT strategy include an objective to study extending the West Line from Wilsonville to Salem with stops in Donald, Woodburn, and Kaiser. This would have the effect of connecting the Portland metro area with the Salem-Kaiser metro area, and that would provide a viable transit option for the commuting workforce between Salem-Kaiser and Portland metro area. And then despite the favorable comments to study West's extension at all 4 milestone points, of the HCT, no proposal to study the extension of West is proposed, and the city and SMART were disappointed that Metro could not work with the Salem-Kaiser Metropolitan Planning Area, and we hope that you will in the future to develop a plan to studying the extending of West.
Thank you, Counselor. Correct. The extension the West corridor is in the high capacity transit strategy. The extension to Salem is not. The extension to Salem, though, is in our regional transportation plan transit vision. So it is included in the RTP. It is under, we have a transit spectrum that is one of the ways that we've talked about the different tools in the transit toolbox. And that is classified as intercity transit because it is connecting areas outside of the region. The Cascadia high capacity transit project I mentioned is another example of that, because it would be making those interregional connections, in that case, even between states. So we look at that a little bit differently. The coordination is a little bit different as well, because there are, it is not just a regional decision, it's actually multiple regions. And it is in the policy framework, because we do have a particular policy that focuses on that. It is the priority that we've identified for intercity transit would be that connection, and that particular line was in the 2010 Oregon State Rail Plan, was one of the ones that had risen to the top as far as potential ridership. And so in the regional transportation plan, we do have all of that language in there. So it is something that Metro is supportive of. We are also, there is a meeting to kick off some of the coordination around that extension, and we are planning to participate in that as well. So we are looking forward to continuing to work together.
Very good. Commissioner Samus.
Yeah, I just want to thank Karen Buehrig for her comments and her assessment. I think that's really spot on. I'm always reminded when we look at these maps, whether it's a map of the transit system or it's a map of the corridors, the high capacity corridors. When you look at Clackamas County, it's pretty blank. There's not much there. I called it in the STIF committees, I called it the spaghetti. All the spaghetti's to the north, and there's not much coming down in our area. So I appreciate Councilor Sherman's comments. I mean, you look at where the fastest growing cities are, Happy Valley being one of them in the state, and yet there's no investment in transit. It seems to me that you have new growth, new opportunities. The most efficient means of actually building for that would be now, in the past, near, going forward, and yet it's still not happening. And I think that is part of the paradigm where we're spending a fortune on existing corridors with parallel, the Green Line, for example. Look at the work on, I appreciate the safety needs. I definitely recognize the safety needs to Multnomah County on 82nd Avenue, long overdue for a facelift. However, to not invest in the areas that are growing like Happy Valley and others is just a shame. And there's limited resources, as we all know. And, it's just, again, there's no regional balance. There's no path. There's no means of achieving regional balance. And I think it's just the part that is continually frustrating for a number of us. I just want to do a shout. Just one other thing I want to just mention, and that is that, someone from the one of the regional transportation people that sit on one of the committees in the Portland area made the comment to me the other day, well, gosh, Clackamas County citizens aren't going to ride transit anyhow. Why waste our money spending there? I go, well, isn't it odd, though, that organically, Estacada, Canby, Sandy, Malala, and, Wilsonville's not rural, but they all took it upon themselves to invest in transit, and they have a transit system within those areas. TriMet serves Estacada, but it's just a shame that some of the higher, denser areas in urban, unincorporated Clackamas County have nothing, while the rural areas have something. So I want to dispel that argument that the conservative or the rural areas or Clackamas County is not interested, when we have more transit agencies in Clackamas County than the whole region combined, and that ought to be demonstrating that there is a demand and there is acceptance of that. It's just that the money doesn't come. The investments aren't happening, and we're losing opportunities as our fastest growing cities are just not having the means to provide the transit. That said, I'll close it off. I'll just end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I definitely hear you on the need for more transit. That's one of the reasons I am really excited about Forward Together 2.0. We have been talking with TriMet about some of the, there were some struggles with COVID-19 and with some of the scenario, what that meant for some of the scenarios with this regional transportation plan. And we have been talking with TriMet about ways that we can make sure that additional investments moving forward don't leave Clackamas County behind. And so something that we are looking forward to in the access to transit work as well. I think one of the things with high capacity transit that we've been talking about throughout this process is the reason that you're seeing some of these corridors that are closer together in parallel in some cases, especially in the denser areas of the region, is that high capacity transit really is a tool because it doesn't necessarily even mean, in some of the work that we're doing now, more service. Ideally it does. Ideally it would mean, bumping up a frequent 15-minute service to 12, but in some cases it doesn't always mean that. It really is about capital investments like the larger buses or that priority in the roadway, really for where transit's sort of bursting at the seams, where we're seeing so much ridership that we're needing those types of investments to make sure that people are continuing to ride towards meeting our climate and equity goals. And so sometimes again, like we've been talking about with the spectrum, it's just that there's a different tool that's needed. And so we know that in Clackamas that there are a number of regionally significant corridors. Part of our challenge with the map is that there just aren't so many actually connecting the regional centers. So you'll actually see most of them on there. There are a couple that are identified for enhanced transit instead, but in some ways we're just limited by geography. And in a lot of cases right now, in the more near term future, the right investments really are more like what you've been talking about with the frequency or ensuring that there is service. And so that's part of the continued work that we want to do together. But I want to mention too, just I really appreciate that the county is so interested in transit and that all of you are so dedicated to making it happen. So that's something we're really excited to work together on.
Very good. Thank you very much for the response. Mr. Bashir, chime on in.
Yeah, being the only true transit person on the call, I had to chime in. I think Commissioner Savas, Billie Holiday answered your question earlier when she wrote the song "God Bless the Child." She said that them that got shall get, and them that not shall lose. And so I think that's what we're seeing here. High capacity transit by definition would only include TriMet. And so it is TriMet centric, but not to be deterred. The small transit providers, we set out to do our own thing. One of those things is behind me on my shoulder, the bus on shoulder, which is not part of the high capacity transit, but it is a very effective tool. A week ago today, SMART was out on the I-205 corridor from Stafford Road to Sunnyside, I believe, working both sides of the interstate there on the shoulder, running tests with ODOT pilot trucks. For SMART's part, we have already purchased the vehicles that will be used on that corridor. We're just waiting for them to be delivered. So I believe what Dr. King believed when he said, only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. And I think that reflects what transit looks like currently in parts of Clackamas County. I'm part of the Oregon Transit Association board for what that is worth. And I challenged them a little over a week ago. I said, we have this STIF money that is being generated, and it's being used to put more transit where there is already robust transit. I said, why don't we get behind putting these funds where there are holes in transit, and there are a number of holes in transit in Clackamas County. And you would have thought that, I said something against the government. They said, well, Dwight, you can't take taxes from one area, say, for instance, Multnomah County, the Portland area, and use those taxes to fund transit in, say, rural Clackamas or rural Washington or rural Douglas County. And I scratched my head. And I said, well, then then I must totally misunderstand what taxing is all about, because they withhold, the federal government withhold taxes from my paycheck every pay period, and I have no idea where that money is going. It's being used in other places. That is what taxation is all about. And so again, I will continue to challenge them. Because to take money and to add transit where there is already robust transit seems to be an exercise in insanity to me. So again, there are some of us that are focused on Clackamas County and putting transit in Clackamas County. Our goal with this service between Wilsonville and Clackamas Town Center is to connect with Sandy that will be coming over the mountain. And we want to do this for free to our customers with free Wi-Fi and everything else that we can provide to them in Clackamas County. We are committed to Clackamas County. I believe it is long overdue that Clackamas County get its due. So it's dark, but I see the stars, and I'm working with a number of folks that see the same stars that I do. So I'll shut up now, get off my soapbox. Thank you for listening.
Very good. Appreciate the comments. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. I'm mindful of who's not here right now, which would be Oregon City and West Linn, and thinking about this map in the context of how they might be seeing it compared to tolling. And that is a conversation that we've had at the staff level that I haven't heard y'all talk about yet. And maybe it's because those two are not here today, but I think that map is a good example of the heartburn that many of our communities are having around the tolling conversation in general, where the first toll program is slated to be, where the expectation of how the toll program is supposed to encourage people to use alternative modes of transportation. And looking at that map, that is a strong disconnect from where we were at the staff level versus what's being communicated by ODOT versus what's being proposed for multiple years from now, even though the toll program is potentially going to begin in 2026. So just wanted to add that frame of reference since those two communities are not here. I'm not trying to make a political statement because I'm a staff person, but I think that's a gap that would have been covered had they attended today.
Very good, Mr. Wilson. Your wisdom is always appreciated. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I just want to really focus on kind of scoping back out in that this report and Allie's work is focused on high capacity transit, and high capacity is going to be best aligned, just as Trent said, along corridors that are already experiencing high capacity needs, like 205. I would like to really emphasize that the work of Forward Together 1.0 led to more uncertainty and not actual helping address the tolling. So when it comes to Forward Together 2.0, I am not optimistic it's going to solve the tolling conversation. I think we need to have a separate venue where TriMet has to make commitments and ODOT has to make commitments. And TriMet's commitments are around service, and ODOT's commitments need to be around funding, because overall we don't have enough funding for transit. And I hear folks say that there are areas that are served by robust transit. I have colleagues who would, just as I talk about my lack of transit in Clackamas County, who can talk about parts of their district that suffer the same. So there are very few areas that are truly robust, even in the Portland metro area. And I don't know if we're going to be in a winning position if we're in a scarcity mindset where we're pitting ourselves against each other, who has it the worst. It's not going to win if we say we have it the worst. We're going to win if we say we have the most need for urgent action because of tolling, or we have the best plan and we're last in line because we got left out last time. So my hope is that we can focus on not only getting through this high capacity question, but then what does the region actually need in the southern bit? And I think that's going to be more shuttles. I think it's going to be more community scale transit, which are the examples that have been coming up as success. And community scale is needing to be integrated into high capacity at junctions, at hubs, but it's its own separate set of plans. It's its own set of investments. So let's stay focused on figuring out how we can get more shuttles and community scale transit stood up. I know that Mayor of West Linn talked to me last week at a coffee shop about forward progression there. I want to see more of it.
Very good. Commissioner Samus, I'll give you the last word on this topic.
Okay, I appreciate Councilor Lewis's comments, and as someone who's been on this committee since the beginning, I would say that those conversations have been, made. Arguments have been made. We continue to make them. I think we're continuing to make them at every venue we can. So I concur, but I do remember, strong conversations and insistence when Mayor Gamba and Mayor Knapp were at the table, and we were pushing hard for transit along the I-205 corridor in advance of, frankly, before HB 2017. So these conversations have been going. We've been making that argument, and after HB 2017 and the tolling conversation, those arguments have been made. If we can make them stronger or more so, great. And I agree that having Oregon City or not having Oregon City today and Westland here today would, did have, not much emphasis on that. But I think we run out of space, time, and opportunity to make all these arguments, but they seem to just fall on deaf ears. But I appreciate your comments, Councilor.
Very good. Robust conversation. Appreciate it. Ali, thank you very much for the information. Kim, I see you're still here. Thank you very much as well. I think we'll put a bow on this one for the time being. Mr. Wilson, do we have a TPAC update today? Is it Karen?
I will look to Karen, and I'll bring in Jamie for that.
Oh, perfect.
So I think for the most part, I provided the TPAC update as a part of kind of our overview of the RTP, the 2023 RTP going forward. It's really what we've been talking about at TPAC. We had a workshop last week, and we'll be moving towards our recommendation come early November. Jamie, did you have anything else?
Yeah, did you mention the OTC letter?
I did not.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. So looking toward the JPAC agenda for tomorrow, one of the items that JPAC will be considering is approval of a letter from JPAC, which would also be signed by the Metro Council, to the OTC about the upcoming STIP cycle and how monies in that state transportation improvement program should be allocated. This coming STIP cycle is a little bit of a different animal, where there is a very small portion of unallocated dollars available statewide. This small portion is to the tune of about $70 million. And that is not a lot of money to spread around. As we consider how our region could interact within that process, Metro staff have put together a draft letter that asks for 3 items. The first is a request that ODOT proactively engage JPAC and the Metro Council in developing a state legislative transportation funding strategy in 2025. Secondly, that ODOT use the newly adopted Oregon Transportation Plan to guide decisions for the available $70 million of discretionary funding. And then finally, and this is one that this group may be interested in, asking that ODOT prepare now to allocate unexpected revenues. Transportation we do a lot of forecasting, but there's a lot we don't know, and things can change quickly. Some things that can change could include things like a new transportation reauthorization, lower than expected debt service, or larger than expected redistribution of funds that create conditions where revenues exceed estimates. Within this particular letter, Metro staff suggests that the Portland metropolitan region ask that the OTC allocate unexpected revenues to projects on ODOT's urban arterial highways, which solicits community input to prioritize solutions. Examples of urban arterials could be places like Highway 212 in Happy Valley, 99 East in Oregon City. The list goes on. So this is just information to be aware of. The packet information begins on page 122 of the JPAC materials if you're interested in having a gander at that material. And Karen and I are here if there are any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much for the update. Any thoughts, questions, comments before we transition to MPAC? All right, looks like you two are off the hook for the day. Thank you for the information, appreciate it. Quick MPAC update. Mr. Mayor Buck, do you want to take this one?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare anything for the MPAC update.
No worries. The last MPAC meeting, I think we covered the urban growth management engagement update. RTP has been a constant theme that has come up, and that will be coming up again at the next meeting. I think we are going to discuss estimating UGB growth capacity going forward, and then that recommendation on the RTP. So that's what I've got for MPAC. So with that, and 4 minutes left in our allotted meeting time, Mr. Wilson, Commissioner Savas, anything you'd like to jump in on at the tail end of this meeting?
I would just maybe ask Trent, could you introduce Brian to some of our new faces here today?
Yes, love that. Thank you, Commissioner Savas, for making that a priority here. It's a priority for me. Brian Hockaday is joining the Clackamas County Government Affairs team. He's been at the county for a couple of years in a public health communications role, but has a great government affairs background. He's going to be stepping in to be facilitating the C4 and C4 subcommittee meetings moving forward, definitely for the next 8 or 9 months, and then maybe beyond that, depending on how things shake out in the spring. For all of us in the government affairs office, we're experiencing a lot of change, including my role. So want to make sure that you get to meet Brian. Brian will be your C4 point of contact moving forward, but I will still be here. But he's going to be your host. You're going to get emails from Brian. So don't move him into spam. Don't move his emails into spam. Read them immediately, because they are just as important as all the emails that I try to send you with a respectful dose throughout the month. So Brian, please say hello and a couple things about yourself.
Yeah, good morning. Appreciate that intro, Trent. Good morning, folks. I'm looking forward to working with you all. Like Trent mentioned, I've been actually within Clackamas County for the past couple of years, but most of my public policy work is really focused on transportation and public safety throughout Oregon. And then I spent a little time up in Seattle. But I'm eager to get engaged with C4. Y'all are grappling with some really important issues, obviously, that really determine the future of our community. So definitely excited to be part of C4 in this work.
Very good. Well, we are glad to have you, and we promise to be easier on you than we have been on Mr. Wilson.
Much appreciated.
Very good. Well, with that, we will call this one a wrap for the day. Good to see you all. Thanks for a great conversation. And for those that are joining us at noon for more C4 tolling discussion, can't wait to see you there.